Good morning to the honorable ministers of the council, members of the media, online viewers, radio listeners via St. Martin Gov Radio 107.9 FM and other radio stations. I'm Rolika Roach and welcome to the live Council of Ministers press briefing for today, Wednesday, November 14th, 2018. At this time, I invite the Minister of Education, Culture, Youth and Sport, the Honorable Wycliffe Smith, to address you. Minister Smith.
Thank you very much, Ms. Roach. Greetings to all gathered here, Madam Prime Minister, Honorable Minister, the Department of Communications, members of the press, as well as the listening and viewing audiences via radio, television, and social media. Good morning, Swaliga. We celebrated St. Martin's Day, November 11th, this past Sunday, with a focus on 370 years of unity and friendship. As organized by our brothers and sisters on the north side, the day began with a very early ecumenical service, followed by the ceremonial wreath-laying ceremony. Then we had the traditional speeches from officials of both sides of the island, followed by the parade of uniformed troops. Prior to November 11th, all of the public primary schools organized a unity and friendship get-together in the Great Bay Sports Auditorium, where the students honored several of our St. Martin cultural icons, and after which they marched through the streets of St. Martin, or Phillipsburg rather, demonstrating the unity and friendship of our St. Martin people. The private schools also organized pre-St. Martin Day celebrations, and I had the privilege to attend a few of these celebrations. At the pre-St. Martin Day celebration of the Sister Regina Primary School, I had the privilege to witness the Living Statues event. Some 28 students dressed up in historic and local figures were able to tell you, in the language of your choice, Dutch or English, something about that person whom they depicted. During my walk along the living statues, I met persons like Peter Stuyvesant, better known as Peg Leg Peter. I met our governor, Dr. Anders Eugene Holliday, and I even had the privilege of meeting myself. That was a very revealing moment when that student was able to tell me about me. On Saturday, a parade was held in Phillipsburg, displaying the beauty of our traditional cultural wear. It is good to see our people from all walks of life come together to celebrate in unity our friendly island home. Let us continue to share with our neighbors so that our rich heritage will be passed on for many generations to come. Yesterday, due to the inclement weather and in consultation with the Meteorological Department of St. Martin, the Council of Ministers advised that all schools were to close at 1:30 p.m. The forecast had changed for the worse, and we did not want to have our children being caught on the roads in the event of flooding in some areas. The Council of Ministers will continue to monitor the weather systems and advisories, and we will make the necessary decisions for safety for all. Yesterday, a meeting was scheduled with the SMVTS, but that meeting was rescheduled for later this week due to the weather forecast. I look forward to meeting with the management, teachers, and other staff members to hear their concerns, their suggestions, and also their solutions. I am aware that this school faces many challenges, but together we will work towards solving them for an improved institution and for a brighter future for all our children. Last Friday, my team and I concluded our presentation of responses to the questions posed by the honorable members of Parliament on the status of the schools for the school year 2018-2019 and the status of the sports and arts facilities and programs post-Hurricane Irma. At this time, I must thank all those who contributed to this process. Particularly, I wish to mention the members of my cabinet, heads of departments, and the Secretary General for their hard work and for their support. At the end of that presentation in Parliament, a motion was tabled and passed while the resolve for the Minister of Education, Culture, Youth and Sports to draft a safe school plan was passed. While I am aware and have read the motion, I await the official communication from the Secretariat of the House of Parliament, but in the meantime, my ministry has already been busy with the concerns of safety and security of all our children in schools. Members of my cabinet have already made contact with the public prosecutor, the community police, and the Inspectorate Division in addressing these concerns. We have requested the current school safety plans of all public schools and subsidized schools so that we can review them. The next step will be to sit with all stakeholders to formulate a plan of action that would result in a possible policy that can be implemented. The aim of the policy would be to introduce fines and other deterrents that can reasonably assist in alleviating a lot of these violent situations. We invite all stakeholders to make their contribution and to be part of the solution and the way forward. We will face challenges, but together we certainly will be able to overcome. The St. Martin Youth Parliament has been holding interscholastic debates among secondary schools on the island. Last Saturday, the two FAVE schools, the St. Martin Academy, the academic section, and the St. Martin Academy, the PSVE or vocational section, were the final teams. The debaters handled the moot expertly and were all deserving of commendation. Congratulations again to the teams, their coaches, the organizers, the schools, and their families. I want to say here that the majority of our young people are involved in positive activities, and they are being groomed to become contributing citizens of our country. We must recognize them, celebrate them, and support them in their endeavors. The athlete of the month, according to the Department of Sports, is Modienne Profas. The Department of Sports is highlighting our professional female bodybuilder, Modienne Profas, for the month of November. Ms. Profas has represented St. Martin on the regional and international platforms, earning several medals and awards over the 20 years that she has been active in this sport. On behalf of the Ministry of Education, Culture, Youth and Sport, I say congratulations to you, Modienne. You've done well. Continue to represent yourself, your association, and your country at this high standard. We're all proud of you. Concerning the ongoing competitions of the St. Martin Volleyball Association, I'd like to say that the St. Martin Volleyball Association and the softball and baseball competitions, that they're ongoing, and I encourage you to support our youngsters in their positive activities. The Brown Pelican Sports Awards ceremony is just 4 days away. The top 3 candidates across 10 categories have been selected, and you can show your support for them via Facebook, via the Facebook page of the Department of Sports. Thank you to the corporate citizens who have contributed by purchasing VIP tables. Remember, the event will be held on Sunday, November 18th, 2018, at the tent at Princess Port de Plaisance. Thank you for watching and for listening, and I will be available for any relevant questions should you have any. Have a pleasant day.
Thank you, Minister Smith, for your opening remarks. At this time, I invite the Minister of Public Housing, Spatial Planning, Environment and Infrastructure, the Honorable Miklos Hiterson, to address you. Minister Hiterson.
Thank you, Ms. Roach. Good morning, Prime Minister, fellow minister, press, and audience members viewing and listening. Last week, I was fortunate to attend the Latin America Geospatial Forum in Mexico City, along with my Secretary General, Mr. Louis Brown. The forum, which saw representatives from over 40 countries, gathered under the theme Geospatial Information, Making a Difference for Millions. The forum is the largest regional conference on geospatial information and technologies, and it provided a platform to meet and network with regional leaders and experts from the geospatial domain. The forum provided great insight into many different areas, and two focuses that were of particular interest to me were the symposium on climate change and natural disasters, and construction and engineering. In both symposiums, it was discussed and demonstrated how geospatial information can be used to develop national strategic plans that can in particular help us in measuring the environmental, social, and economic impact of natural disasters, as well as how we can start our move towards more resilient planning and better design of infrastructure. This forum tied perfectly in with the National Spatial Data Infrastructure consultation that the ministry held in August. One of the main goals of that consultation was to discuss the importance of sharing each organization's GIS layer, in order to create maps with more accurate and detailed information. As we took note in Mexico of how the technology is implemented in countries much larger than ours, we are now tasked with how we will translate that information to work for us here in St. Martin. Next, last week while I was in Mexico, there was a stir caused locally when it was reported that the government was supposedly withholding pertinent information from the general public. I think my colleague ministers did an excellent job of responding to the allegations, and I as well would like to add my 2 cents now. The issue at the landfill is a problem that this current government did not create. It is one that we met. Through years of mismanagement, delays, bureaucracy, and a fear of taking unpopular decisions, we are where we are today. I would like to reiterate that we are doing everything in our power to ensure that this matter is resolved through the most safe, environmentally friendly, economical, and socially acceptable path. To complement the World Bank study, which was a bit limited in scope, the ministry is engaging the services of the Dutch Institute for Public Health and Environment to conduct wider air quality tests in surrounding communities, specifically geared at assessing risks to public health. As those tests are done and the report has been finalized, we will be as transparent as we can with the results. We have nothing to hide. That being said, the fire suppression project is still moving along. Environmental and social assessments are being conducted, and we have already started to procure some of the equipment that will be needed for the suppression of the work. Of course, nothing ever moves as fastly as as we really want it to. The important thing is, though, that it is steadily moving forward. Lastly, as reported, the road patching project has resumed this week with work scheduled to be done in the Coal Bay area. Originally slated to start Monday evening, it was postponed due to the rain and again last night for the same reason. As soon as the weather cooperates, work will resume. All work is now being carried out at night to avoid the delays that we experienced a few weeks ago. In anticipation of the start of this year's high season, the Department of Infrastructure has started and will continue, weather permitting, to beautify the Phillipsburg area by removing old trees, replacing loose bricks, removing hazards, etc. The return of the cruise vessels is critical to our economy, and we recognize its importance. In that light, I am asking businesses to please be mindful of the way trash is disposed. Trash should be put out at the end of the business day in designated areas for whatever means of pickup has been arranged. Also, I am imploring all motorists to not park on the sidewalks. We need these areas clear so that our guests and us as residents as well can safely and comfortably walk the streets and enjoy our beautiful town. I know the Ministry of Justice will also be monitoring the situation. Save yourself the fine and the hassle of having your car towed away. As Phillipsburg is often the first and last impression our tourists have of our island, it is important that we all pitch in as government, business owners, and residents alike to keep the town clean and safe. This concludes my press briefing for today. Thank you.
The Minister of Romi will not be here for any questions. If you do have any questions, please direct it to the Minister's Cabinet directly. Thank you, Minister Heatherson. At this time, I would like to invite the Prime Minister and Minister of General Affairs, the Honorable Leona Romeo Marlin, to address you. Prime Minister.
Good morning to all my colleagues present, members of the press. Good morning, St. Martin. This morning I start with sad news, as I was just informed of the passing of Mr. Donald Canagita, and on behalf of the Council of Ministers and the government of St. Martin, I hereby express my deepest condolences to the Minister of Justice, Mr. Cornelius De Wever, the Canagita family, the Wever family, and many of their friends. Additionally, I would also like to express my condolences to the family and friends of Marolín Cuevas Santana, the young lady that lost her life on St. Martin's Day. At this time, I would like to publicly thank the Voluntary Corps of St. Martin, VKS, for their assistance by ensuring that St. Martin's flag was raised on the Coal Bay Hill at the Bells family property in celebration of St. Martin's Day. The flag was raised on Saturday morning, November 10th, and taken down on Monday afternoon, November 12th, to ensure that it does not get tattered or torn as the previous flags. This government is still committed to a structured and permanent solution for the flying of the flag on the Hill. Plans will be forthcoming. As it relates to the Dutch and French cooperation, on Monday, November 12th, a meeting was held with Prefect Sylvie Fauchère and the second Vice President, Mr. Yawu, in Uadzi. The purpose of this meeting was to follow up on the points outlined in the joint declaration at the quadripartite meeting in June 2018. Some of the topics discussed were the wreck removal in Simpson Bay Lagoon, solid waste management, prevention of double taxation, shared weather radar system, SZV pension payments to French residents, disaster management cooperation, just to name a few. This meeting acts as a precursor to a meeting scheduled for December 3rd, where it is expected that both sides will present individuals' progress reports. On Friday, November 17th, an extensive disaster exercise will take place primarily at the White and Yellow Cross location in St. John's. All first responders on the island will participate: the ambulance, the police, fire department, Red Cross, WEAMS, and all emergency support function groups. The emergency exercise will focus on practicing the operational collaboration between the first responders, the ESF groups, and all participating organizations. The aim is to ensure rapid and coordinated action in case a disaster strikes. An estimated 100 people will take part in this multidisciplinary disaster exercise. An extensive exercise like this one is exceptional because it takes a lot of preparation, effort, and time of all participants. The emergency exercise is part of the ongoing cooperation between the Government of St. Martin and VNG International to strengthen the disaster preparedness and provide safety and response in future disasters. And finally, at the implementation of the first trust fund projects is picking up speed, I would like to share two positive updates with you today as Emergency Recovery Project 1 of the trust fund. This is the $55 million project that will finance many urgently needed works, including the repairs of our public buildings and the strengthening of the capacity of our first responders. I would like to remind all interested parties that the Interim Recovery Committee has published a tender for the urgently needed repairs of the police stations in Phillipsburg and Simpson Bay last week. All necessary information on these and other outstanding tenders can be found on the government's website and on the Facebook page of the National Recovery Program Bureau. I'm also happy to report that the IRC, so the Interim Recovery Committee, expects to launch the tender for the first homes that will be repaired through the trust fund in the coming weeks. The roof repair program of Emergency Recovery Project 1 will support the repairs of severely damaged houses of low-income families and supplements the existing roof repair program of the Ministry of VROMI and the UNDP. In conclusion, I encourage all interested parties to keep a close eye on the announcements of the tenders. The success of the recovery process depends on all of us. I thank you and I await your questions.
Thank you, Prime Minister, for your opening remarks. The Minister of Tourism, Economic Affairs, Transport, and Telecommunication, the Honorable Stuart Johnson, is present, however, will not be making any opening statements this morning. We now move on to the question and answer session. Alita Singh of the Daily Herald, you have the floor.
Good morning, Relaika. Thank you so much. Good morning, Prime Minister, Minister Smith, Minister Johnson. My first question is for the Prime Minister. I'm sure you've been keeping abreast of the news, of course, coming out of Bonaire, as well as the news, the ongoing situation in Statia, where the Dutch government is taking more of an active role in governance of those two territories. On St. Martin, of course, we have a different status. And there has been concerns that through the trust fund and through the ability to give money to certain entities such as GEBE and the airport, that the Dutch will make similar moves through those government-owned companies to try to take over management of the company, perhaps even try to get to streamline the personnel, which is something that the CFT has also been asking for. Are you aware of any such move? Is there any agreement or any talks of such?
Thank you, Alita, for that question. Indeed, I am aware of the Bonaire and Statia issues that are currently being, talked about right now. As it relates to the Dutch taking over with similar moves, at this point in time, there has been no indication of such. I can tell you that indeed many of the entities that you have identified have asked for funding through the trust fund. If you ask the question, is the Netherlands interested or not interested, but has the Netherlands made a proposal in order to get certain conditions to be implemented in order to get some of the trust fund money. Indeed, they have. But are they going to take over? There has been absolutely no talks about taking over any of our companies, and I don't think that's in the best interest of St. Martin, but absolutely not.
Thank you, Prime Minister. Stephen Cerulean of PJ82 Radio, you have the floor.
Prime Ministers, good morning. My question is for the Minister of Education. You mentioned that the school safety plan is currently being worked on. Is there a time frame as to when this safety plan for the various schools to address the fighting or violence issues at schools will be implemented?
Well, I'm sure, Mr. Cerulean, that you are aware of the motion that was passed in Parliament, and that motion gives a timeline of 30 days to report on what is being done or what has been done, and 60 days in terms of presenting a report. We will follow that timeline. As I said in my opening remarks, a lot has been done, is being done. We're contacting the prosecutor's office and schools, getting their safety plans, reviewing them. They may need to be updated, and that will be reported according to the timeline that was mentioned in Parliament in the motion, and then we will proceed to working out a plan that would include the various elements that are mentioned in the motion.
Thank you, Minister Smith, for your response. Lyndon Brown of BCN TV, you have the floor.
Good morning to the people of St. Martin and the ministers today. After a wonderful day, St. Martin's Day, question to Minister of Tourism. You have contributed to the Caribbean Igloo. Over 200 and more people, bikers, came to the island. I sure, of course, you're aware of that. And today, there are 6 ships at our harbor. You should be one of the happiest ministers today. You have something to say on these happenings?
Thank you for your question. Of course, every day there's ships in port, I am indeed elated. And when there's airlines arriving at our airport, I'm even more elated, because that means there's economic activity booming in the country. And of course, not only today is the recognition of several ships in port, but more so on other days still yet to come, where there'll be also additional ships berthing at our cruise facility, over 6 ships yet again. So we did have activities planned for today, the tourist office, as well as other stakeholders, the airport and otherwise, and the harbor. But due to the intermediate weather that was supposed to hit today, the rain that was expected, we had to postpone those events until the other 6 ships come now in the next week or so, on the 24th of the month. So indeed, it is an exciting opportunity for us as a destination, because it shows the resilience and strength of our people and our destination as a tourist destination going forward. In addition, we must look at the fact that should those ships have not arrived on St. Martin today, it would have cost about 1 million in economic activity that would have been lost. Unfortunately, one of those ships, I was brief, had to be diverted to Antigua due to the weather that was approaching. So it's again very important that when, as a Minister of Economic Affairs, I have to make certain decisions where tourists are in town or businesses have to be open, it is for that simple reason. They are still the economic aspect of our country that has to be booming, means that persons will have jobs, persons will be employed, that there's money flowing through the economy. So while it looks nice for social media and other things to say certain things loosely, when you look at the bigger picture of the economic aspect, the economic benefit of making sure that the economy is booming, that businesses are booming, it benefits all either directly or indirectly. So of course I am elated today to have those ships in port, and as well as every day that there's ships and airlines at our main ports of entry.
Thank you, Minister Johnson, for your response. We now move on to the second round of questions. Alita Singh, you have the floor.
Thanks again, Orlaika. My second question is also for the Prime Minister. It follows up a bit on what I asked earlier. The CFT has been saying for quite a while that the government apparatus itself is very large. The budget of St. Martin, the majority of it goes between personnel and education, for instance. Are there plans to downsize government and government-owned companies? Are there any plans? Are there any agreements on the table?
As far as I know, as chair of the Council of Ministers, we have never spoken about downsizing the government apparatus. We haven't spoken about downsizing the government-owned companies as well. What we are talking about is income-generating measures, and we have spoken about cost-cutting measures as it relates to our operations in certain areas where we can perhaps cut back on. But one of the things that we are more focusing on right now is definitely income generating measures. So as far as I have been here since I've been sworn in as Prime Minister, we haven't spoken about downsizing the government apparatus, not in the Council of Ministers meeting. So yeah, that is my response to that question. I got a similar question from another reporter, and it shocks me how information goes out to the public without my knowledge, or at least without the Council of Ministers' knowledge. Then we have to come in and defend. But indeed, we have not spoken about that. If you ask me, though, if we're going to be looking for those civil servants that are not working and still getting paid and falling through the cracks, that's a different question. So everyone, you come to work, you give government your full hours, just as much as government has to pay you, you have to also produce and you have to come to work. That's a different matter. And I think in the past we called it ghost workers, and that was a situation that we tackled back then, and it's something that we have to look into now. But I do know that there aren't as much ghost workers as we had in the past because of that exercise. Should we revisit? That is something that we have spoken about, yes.
Thank you, Prime Minister. Stephen Cerillion.
Minister Johnson, your recent announcement that you'll be making some 50 passes available to Carnival revelers during this 50th anniversary has garnered some sort of a reaction from the Wixu PSU. They're basically saying that this money, $12,500 should be used in other areas of importance in the development of the country. Your reaction?
Well, first of all, Stephen, thank you for the question. Of course, I'm very glad to see the union be very vocal. Of course, I've been a union member of the Y2 for still a number of years, and up to today, I'm still a paying member if I look at my payslip even today as a civil servant. So I'm very elated to see that a union is now active, but you should be active consistently. So it's very disheartening to see that certain unions cherry pick what they want to champion for, especially for civil servants, because civil servants, as I consider myself one still, it's very important to have those issues championed, bigger issues than just worrying about the economic benefit of having 50 season passes giving to patrons that would be supporting Carnival, would be supporting booths in the Carnival Village. And how could I say this? Because I was a former booth holder at one point in time myself as well, where it takes an estimated $2,000 or $3,000 a minimum to invest in a booth. Make sure there is that return on your investment opportunity. So having booths supported by 50 patrons for sure that would support local events where persons have invested their money into pageantry, into the calypso competitions, into all the musical entertainment and acts, the bands, our musical ambassadors that invest their time and energy to create songs. So if I'm given away through the Ministry of TIAT, in particular the Tourist Office, 50 passes where anyone has the opportunity to do so, then indeed the economic benefit outweighs the amount of the price tag for those tickets. So I'm glad to see the union active, and I hope they're active consistently. And if there's any other union issues that maybe I too could support them as a former unionist myself.
Thank you, Minister Johnson. Lyndon Brown, you have the floor.
To the Honorable Prime Minister, you are emphasizing and economic benefit of St. Martin, but it have been spread and spreading that about 30% will be dismissed. Well, from government apparatus, I don't know exactly which department, but it already spread. You know, as usual, the negative spread fast. One of our colleagues asked about downsizing of departments, but you said your government do not have no plan of downsizing. You also mentioned that there are civil servants who are not active. For a long time, all these have been spreading all over. Are you saying that these civil servants who are not active will be dismissed?
Thank you, Lyndon Brown. You come up with figures that I have never heard before, 30, some say 49. I'm so shocked with these figures, but thank you for your question. 30 persons that will be dismissed from the government apparatus. I have never heard of any 30 persons. As I stated before, when the question was asked about dismissal of persons or downsizing, we have never spoken about downsizing in a Council of Ministers meeting. What we have discussed is looking into the organization and seeing where we can increase our revenues. That's one. So looking at income generating measures. And two, if we also have to look, because it's only a responsible act to make sure that everyone is giving their input into the organization. Productivity at times can be low in some departments because of sick leave, long-term sick leave, persons that don't show up to work, but we haven't had an exact figure on that as yet. That is something that the Personnel Affairs Department will have to look into. As I stated before, this was done in the past, and in the past we had quite a few, and after that exercise was done, the numbers decreased. From the information that I received in my first term, the amount is not that much. But they didn't give me an exact figure. I will follow up on it, but definitely there aren't 30 persons, at least not in the information, from the information that I have received. And again, I don't know where you got that information from, but I can definitely tell you it is inaccurate, as that discussion has never came to the Council of Ministers. We are not aware of that, so I can't substantiate what you're saying, because to me it is actually untrue.
Thank you, Prime Minister. We now move on to the final round of questions. Alita Singh, you have the floor.
Thanks again, Rolika. My final question is for Mr. Johnson. We're already in the high season, so to speak. However, our room inventory is still building itself up. How are you looking forward to the next high season? Have you already started to plan for that? What is your marketing strategy and what is your budget for that?
Well, thank you, Alita, for the question. Of course, we're looking at, for the first quarter of 2019, at a room inventory about 70%. So this particular season is very important for us because we're seeing some of the major airlines come back to our destination, as well as the frequency of flights. In addition to that, of course, we expect to see package 1 of the airport be finalized. I had a briefing with airport management yesterday in regards to that particular aspect of the restoration works of the airport, and it is the intention to continue with the package 1 completion by December 15. As shareholder representative, I continue to monitor the situation, in particular with the airport, as indeed the airport is of paramount importance, considering the precarious situation the airport found itself in the beginning. In terms of destination and marketing, of course, we have the MOU with French St. Martin, where the Vice President and I have continued to commit ourselves to the marketing of a joint destination, French side and Dutch side unified in that approach, and I will continue to meet with the respective airlines, the respective tourism representatives, as well as explore airline meetings for additional airlift, as well as to maintain the hub function for our island. Those exploratory trips within the region, especially at the backdrop of Winair being our national carrier, is expected to continue. Due to some scheduling issues, I had to postpone one of the trips. However, that trip is still on schedule to be had. And of course, we look forward to, budget-wise, once the entire budget cycle for 2019 is finalized and approved by Parliament, that indeed the marketing of the destination and all that has been budgeted continues for Destination St. Martin going forward.
Thank you, Minister Johnson. Stephen Cerulean.
My final question is for the Minister of TIAT. Minister, we are seeing, well, hopefully, a busy tourist season. More cruise ships, more visitors, more passengers to St. Martin overall. The Minister of Romy earlier on stated that we need to keep the island clean as much as possible. That means more garbage to the dump site. Are you able to tell us how, or if any, garbage from the cruise ships, are they being dumped at the dump site as well?
To my knowledge, Stephen, thank you for the question. Those cruise lines do not dump at our garbage facilities here presently. Of course, we are closely monitoring the entire situation from a cruise aspect as well as a tourism aspect. The cleanliness of destination St. Martin, you know, my first days in office, I echoed my sentiments in regards to the cleanliness of the island, making sure St. Martin is indeed not only clean, but that the hospitality of our people continues throughout every level of this island, through the service level, through the day-to-day runnings of our country. That is of paramount importance to St. Martin, and the return of St. Martin coming back stronger than ever. In operations meeting with cruise lines as well as cruise line executives, they continue to state that St. Martin is indeed number one and resilient. As the numbers show for Carnival Cruise Lines, St. Martin now is back up to those high numbers that we had in terms of spending as well as passenger spending. So we still maintain our high position within the cruise industry, and of course, in a general sense, the port itself as well as the realities at the port continues to be a focus of the Ministry of TIAT. Thank you.
Thank you, Minister Johnson. Lyndon Brown, you have the final question.
The final question to Minister Smith. Minister Smith, there you have the Parliament give you 60 days to come up with a document to combat ills in the schools. I can't remember that if the Parliament ever gave the Minister of Education before that deadline. Why it's so urgent, Minister Smith? And the emphasis, I heard, you will have to finding a child. As long as the child is underage, their parents are responsible. What are other areas? Because there are a lot of things happening in schools, Minister Smith. But the emphasis and finding, what are some other areas that the emphasis is on?
Thank you, Mr. Brown, for your question. With regards to motions, the Parliament, that's one of the activities that they do, to give instructions or to ask the government or a minister to execute a certain task, motions. And I had the good fortune to do some studies on that before I became a parliamentarian or a minister, and found out that there were some 75 motions had been given by Parliament. 55 were passed and 22 were not passed. And I think this is the first time perhaps that a minister is saying, yes, Parliament has given an instruction and he will execute it. I just last week or 2 weeks ago, I received from Madam Chair of Parliament 2 motions that were passed, one in 2015 and one in 2016, concerning the English language and the use of it in schools. And she asked me if I would take that up. So you can see that motions have been passed over the years, but ministers or governments have not really followed through. I think that this is a very important motion. It's a motion that it's something that we were busy with even before it was passed. So it's in line and in keeping with what we're doing. Some of the things that were given in the motion for the minister to look at would be parental support, positive peer pressure, parental responsibility, safety, school safety plans, a school transportation policy, a rehabilitation program catered to the youth, and public awareness. These are elements that we will review and study and report on when we have concluded our research in this particular area. So I'm happy that you asked the question, and we'll be working on it, and we'll try to keep the timeline that Parliament has given to us.
If the timeline expire, is there any consequences?
Well, I believe that one would have to give a reason, and you can set a timeline, especially when you're dealing with people or with social issues. But you may not be able to meet that deadline, and important is to inform Parliament that one is working on this, but will not be able to meet the deadline and would be able to meet it then at another date. So that's how it works. You know, it's not that if I don't meet the deadline that, you know, I'll be dismissed.
Thank you, Minister Smith, for your response. Honorable Ministers of the Council, members of the media, radio listeners, and online viewers, this brings us to the end of the Live Council of Ministers press briefing for today, November 14th, 2018.